Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to our 42nd step through the Bible. We're still in the book of Numbers, and we come to a comic interlude, a serious sort of comic interlude. There is quite a bit of comic writing in the Old Testament, but the comic writing that we find in the Old Testament is always there for a serious purpose. What I'm talking about now is the episode of Balaam, which is chapters 22 to chapter and 23 of the book of Numbers. You might just like to put me on hold and read them for yourself. Then I'll give you some sort of commentary. Okay, if you've read chapters 22 and chapters 20 and 23 of the book of Numbers, what happens? Well, essentially understanding the story is this. There is a comic frame, but what it frames is 7 prophecies of Balaam, or Balaam, or however you pronounce it. Balaam seems to be a sort of freelance prophet who lives in Mesopotamia by the river, which is the Euphrates, and Balak, the king of Moab, who is terrified of the Israelites about to invade his country, summons Balaam to come and curse the Israelites. And then there's a little bit of sort of comic to and fro. Yes, he will come. No, he won't come. He can't come. God has told him he can't come, and so on. And eventually he is going along, the donkey turns aside and he hits the donkey. Then the donkey rubs him against a wall because the donkey's seen the angel of the Lord blocking the path. And then eventually the donkey sits down, won't go any further, so he hits him again. Then eventually the donkey is given a voice by God, so it becomes the second talking animal in the Bible. The first, remember, was the serpent in the book of Genesis. And the donkey says, "Why are you hitting me? I've always been such a wonderful donkey for you," etc. And he said, "Well, it's not you," in blah, blah, blah. And so there's this sort of comic to do. And then eventually Balaam arrives and he looks out over the Israelite camp. And instead of cursing them as the Moabite king wants him to do, he utters 7 prophecies of blessing. Now, if we look at the first prophecy, which is 23, 7 to 10, it's really lovely. "Balak has brought me from Aram," says the prophet, "the king of Moab from the hills of Kedem. Come and curse Jacob for me. Come and denounce Israel." How shall I curse someone whom the Lord has not cursed? How denounce someone whom God has not denounced? Yes, from the top of the crags I see him, from the hills I descry him, a people that dwells on its own, not to be reckoned among the other nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob? Who can number the cloud of Israel? May I die the death of the just, and make my future be like theirs. A perfect little poem. So that's the whole point of this comic story, leading up to this perfect little poem. Now, presumably, I assume the perfect little poem existed in a little anthology, and the writer of the book of Numbers, or somebody, placed it in this framing story about the comic donkey and so on. This is beautiful because it says this, a people that dwells on its own, not to be reckoned among the other nations. In other words, the chosen people are just that, chosen, special. They are unique. They dwell on their own. They're not like other people. They are monotheists and they follow the law of God, unlike everybody else. And then, of course, they have been blessed by God, who can count the dust of Jacob. And don't forget, Abraham was promised that his descendants would be as numerous as the sand on the seashore. Who can number the cloud of Israel? In other words, it's an enormous amount of people. And so, therefore, Balaam recognizes the special nature of the people of God, the special chosen nature of the people of Israel. So then this annoys the king, Balak, so he's taken to another place and to make another prophecy, but instead of a curse, out comes yet another blessing. "Stand up, Balak, and listen. Give me ear to me, son of Zippor. God is no human being that he should lie, no child of Adam to change his mind. It is his to say and not to do. It is his to speak. No, sorry. Is it his to say and not to do? Is it his to speak and not fulfill? The charge laid on me is to bless. I shall bless, and I cannot reverse it. I have perceived no guilt in Jacob, have seen no perversity in Israel. The Lord, his God, is with him, and a royal acclamation to greet him. God has brought him out of Egypt." In other words, the people of Israel are called by God, not just chosen by God, called by God to come out of Egypt and protected by God. Well may the the people say of Jacob of Israel, what has God achieved? For here is a people like a lioness rising, poised like a lion to spring. Nor will he lie down till he has devoured his prey and drunk the blood of his slain. So they are a mighty people, just like the king of the beasts, the lion. Then a third prophecy, and this one again, we're in chapter 24. How fair your tents are, Jacob, how fair your dwellings, Israel, like valleys that stretch afar, like gardens by the banks of a river, like aloes planted by the Lord, like cedars beside the water. So Israel is beautiful. Let that sink in. Israel is beautiful. The people of God are beautiful. And of course, what I would say here is the church is beautiful. We love the church because the church is beautiful. Let's remember that. Let's not forget that. And then he goes on and says, a hero arises from their stock. He reigns over countless peoples. In other words, a great king is going to arise from this wonderful people Israel. And here we have the very first prophecy in the Bible so far of the Messiah, or what we recognize as the Messiah. And then, of course, another prophecy, so the same thing happens again, and we have yet another prophecy, verse 16. And I see him, says Balaam, but not in the present. I perceive him, but not close at hand. A star is emerging from Jacob. A scepter is rising from Israel. Well, what's it talking about? It's talking about the Messiah. Maybe it's talking about King Saul. Maybe it's talking about King David. Maybe it's talking about Jesus Christ himself. And a star is emerging from Jacob. This, of course, is something we think of when we read the Gospel of St. Matthew, how the wise men from the east followed the star. And the star, a scepter, the star indicated a king. So the king is born in Israel, a scepter is rising from Israel. And then then he gives three more little prophecies, one against the Amalekites, saying they're on a hiding to nothing, one against the Kenites, saying, well, the Kenites aren't so bad because they're allies of the people of Israel, and one against the sea people, the Philistines, and they're saying that they too are finished. So Balaam is called to curse the people of Israel, but his curses are not curses at all, they are blessings. Now, I think it's really important to realize the people of God are blessed by God. The people of God have all sorts of wonderful privileges. Therefore, the people of God need to behave as the people of God. The passage about Balaam is a lovely passage. It's a nice passage too. It makes you laugh with the talking donkey, reproaching the prophet Balaam. But the prophet Balaam, seeing the people of Israel, is the first prophet, actually, in the Old Testament to recognize the coming of the Messiah, the coming of Jesus himself, as we Christians would say, as we Christians recognize. That's all for our 42nd step through the Bible, and I think you'll agree with me once more. Unexpected things happen when you read the book of Numbers. All the best. Bye.